Did you know that Utah has one of the highest suicide rates in the country and is the 8th leading cause of death overall in our state? On an average, one person dies by suicide about every 15 and a half hours just in our state. That is astonishing and very sad. Suicide costs Utah an average of $1.3 million per suicide death. It's the third leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14. Breaks my heart. I just can't even talk right now. It just breaks my heart. It's the third leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14. The second leading cause of death for ages 15 to 44. And the fourth leading cause of death for ages 45 to 54. Our trainers today are Nicole Felshaw and Brandon Ray, who are certified trainers from our Washington County Commission office. Please help me in welcoming them.
Well, we know why you were clapping. It wasn't for me. It was for Nicole over here. So I'm just going to be honest real quick. You guys are a very intimidating bunch. I feel like I don't know what to say, and that's primarily because one, you're intimidating, and two, the commissioner's wife is sitting right here. And I just have to say we have the best commissioners in the county, let alone the nation. So as Pam mentioned, my name's Brandon Ray. I work on the HR side for the county. Nicole Felshaw right here works on the commission side for the county. About a year ago now, the commissioners tasked us to train our county employees on suicide. Through the Southwest Behavioral Health Center, what they're doing is they have an initiative right now to get as many people QPR suicide trained that can go out and about among the community to train as many possible. And so we can know what's happening with suicide, what we can do to prevent suicide, and just to really be better neighbors, better friends. Because as we go through these slides, I'm sure every one of here, and I'm not going to ask for names, I'm not going to ask for people to raise their hands, but I'm going to bet you almost everyone in here has probably been affected by suicide through a loved one, through a neighbor, through a friend. And so for that reason, that's why we're here. What I'd like to do is start with a little video to kind of get it moving, and we'll go from there.
We have lost far too many lives traveling the path to this day.
Since 1937, over 2,000 people have died at the Golden Gate Bridge. I feel lucky to be alive every single day. Of the thousands that have died off the Golden Gate Bridge, I am of the 1% who have survived. So I was born on drugs and premature, and then I bounced around from home to home, and nobody wanted to keep me because I was sick. And I got lucky. I landed in the home of Patrick and Deborah Hines. I had a great childhood. I thought, growing up, that everything's going to be great. And then at 17, it all came crashing down. You can imagine feeling that everyone around you is out to get you, trying to hurt you, and trying to kill you. And you believe that to be the truth. From the extreme paranoia, I exhibited symptoms of mania. From the mania came the hallucinations, both auditory and visual. And so with that and bipolar disorder, I just was spiraling out of control. I vividly remember writing my suicide note. People don't get it. Like, I thought I was a burden to everyone who loved me. Because that's what my brain told me, because that's how powerful your brain is. I got off the bus. I walked slowly down the walkway of the Golden Gate Bridge. People rode by me, drove by me, walked by me, and a woman approached me. And she said, "Do you take my picture?" She said thanks, and she walked away. At that moment, I just said, nobody cares. The reality was that everybody cared. I just couldn't see it. I ran forward, using my two hands, I catapulted myself into free fall. What I'm about to say is the exact same thing that 19 Golden Gate Bridge jump survivors have also said. The millisecond my hands left the rail, it was an instant regret. And I remember thinking, no one's gonna know that I didn't want to die. In 4 seconds I fell 75 miles an hour, 25 stories, and I hit the water. I was in the most physical pain I'd ever experienced. I have ever experienced. The Coast Guard was amazing. He was just so freaked out that I was alive that he just dove in and brought me on board. And I said, do you know how many people we pull out of this water that are already dead? And I said, no, and I don't want to know. The guy put his hand on my forehead and said, kid, you're a miracle. My father took one step into the hospital room, and I looked up at him and I said, Dad, I'm sorry. And he said, no, Kevin, I'm sorry. And if you think about it, both of our immediate reactions were guilt. Guilt that didn't belong to either of us. And even though I didn't die, I caused people a great deal of grief and pain. Just the day of my attempt still sits within them today. I asked my father if he still feared my death by suicide. He said every time the phone goes off, his first inclination is Kevin alive. I had that impact on my dad. After the jump, the road to recovery was pretty long. I had 7 psych ward stays in the next 11 years. I still have all the symptoms I ever had. Mania, depression, psychosis, hallucinations, all that's still there. I just know how to cope with it and I know how to beat it. I built a support network over these years of treatment so that I wouldn't be fighting this alone. So like, it's okay not to be okay. It's not okay not to ask for someone to back you up. To the families who live with the losses of loved ones, they didn't do that to hurt you or destroy your life. They took their lives because they were struggling in a great deal of emotional and mental pain. Suicide, mental illness, and addiction are the only diseases that we blame the person for perpetually. But people die from suicide just like they die from any other organ disease. Today, no matter the pain I'm in, no matter the struggles I experience, I do believe that life is the greatest gift we've ever been given. And if you're suffering mentally, don't wait like I did, sitting in denial for so long. Because recovery happens. Living proof.
All right, so generally I'd ask, but for the sake of time, generally I'd ask, how did that make you feel? So think about it. Today we're talking about suicide. Now I know for myself, and I'm sure many of you, when the word let alone suicide is brought up, generally we cringe. We say, I just don't want to talk about this because it's sensitive. Well, maybe it's taboo. All I know is we should be talking about it more. And just for that reason, in that video, the second his hands left the Golden Gate Bridge, it was instant regret. He thought he was a burden to people, just as many that take their own lives feel like they're a burden to others just the same. And so the more we talk about it, the more we're open about it, the more we can hopefully better understand and better recognize those that actually may be dealing with suicidal thoughts, suicidal intentions, so we can intervene. The whole point of this presentation that Nicole and I are going to go over today is just that, is to gain knowledge about what suicide is, what QPR stands for, and how we can prevent it from occurring, because we're a neighbor, we're a friend, we're a loved one, and we all want what's best for people. And oftentimes when they feel that, it's my time to go, they're probably not in the right stage of mind. And so we need to say, okay, what can we do to intervene? Now, when we talk about a gatekeeper in brief is someone that's a brother, a sister, a child, a parent, a friend. So everyone in this room is a gatekeeper. Everyone has the ability to recognize someone or to know someone that may be going through a tough time, regardless of what that is, that may be planning to take their own life. So our goal, we're going to cover 4 things, and generally, now we're on a time constraint today, generally our presentation would be about an hour and a half. We would then certify the people that attended, hey, you're QPR certified, go out, teach people, help them understand what QPR stands for, what's happening with suicide right now. But just bear with us, we are going to go through these pretty quickly, but we're still going to help you better understand why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, and hopefully you can then go ahead and share the same message that we're sharing with you today. So we just want to raise awareness about suicide. Second, we want to dispel myths and misunderstandings. We'll go through some stats that'll become apparent as to what's really happening with suicide rates. Third, we want to teach warning signs of suicide. And fourth, we want to teach QPR gatekeeper intervention. Question, persuade, refer. So here we've got some stats. The number of deaths for leading causes of deaths within the U.S. Heart disease being the number one leading cause of death. Number 10, you have intentional self-harm. Now, the question I generally ask is, okay, is there an issue? 614,000 heart disease people dying versus 42,000, is that an issue? The answer I've always got is, yeah, it's an issue. And there's various reasons as to why that's an issue. Well, maybe we're not talking about it enough. Maybe we're not realizing it truly is impacting America and the world for that matter. And third, maybe it could have been prevented. So here we have the nation, all the states of the nation. All the states in red are the states that have the leading suicide rates within the nation. Now we kind of see a correlation, right? They're all Western-sized states. Now, unfortunately, because suicide is more taboo, because people generally don't talk about it, because there's a ton of funding going into heart disease and not so much really, if anything, going into suicide, we just don't know. We don't know why it's happening within the western-sized states. Now, there's some assumptions, and I think they're probably pretty good assumptions. Maybe it's the higher elevation. Maybe it's the, access, to firearms. They're more prevalent in the western states. Maybe it's, I don't know. I mean, that's the problem. We just don't know. But regardless, it's happening and we can see it. So to kind of bring it down from a national side to a state side, here we have the state of Utah. Now, the state of Utah put together the numbers, and the number of deaths by suicide in the state of Utah for 2016 was 559. Now, nationally, that's 42,773, and so an argument could be made, well, it's really not that high, right? Well, there again, could it have been prevented? Should we have known about it? Did we know about it until now? In Utah, suicide is the third leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14-year-olds. Second leading cause of death for ages 15 to 44. So this isn't just happening with our elderly, our middle-aged people. This is happening with our youth just the same. And we've got a great KSL, little special that will kind of talk about that the way it's impacting youth is happening right now. It's prevalent. It's going on. And so we need to talk about it. We need to be more open about it. Okay. Yep, sorry. So survivors.
Sorry.
Good. There's a clicker.
Thank you. Sorry, we've condensed everything a little bit, so you might be a little confused. But they say that survivors are blood relatives of those who die by suicide. So potentially what they're trying to tell us is that for every suicide, there are 6 survivors. So that means 1 in 62 people is a survivor. Kay Jameson, Night Falls Fast, it said, "Suicide is a death like no other, and those who are left behind to struggle with it must confront a pain like no other." And I'm sure that probably each one of us somewhere can really bring that to heart and understand what that's meaning. So the impact of one person. So I'm going to talk about this person, and I want you to think of who it could be. This person was born the same year that Meriwether Lewis committed suicide. At age 2 to 3, his infant brother died. At age 9, his great aunt, uncle, and mother died, all within a 2-week period. After his mother's death, he was raised by his older sister, Sarah. At age 19, his sister Sarah died. At age 26, one of his best friends, Ann Rutledge, died. At age 31, he experienced 6 months of serious depression. Friends were so concerned that they removed all razors, knives, pistols, etc. from his room and presence because they feared that he would complete suicide. He described himself as, quote, "the most miserable man living. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die or get better." he had a friend, Joshua Speed, who remained with him constantly during this time. Joshua spent 6 months with this individual until the crisis passed. So the only question we're probably going to ask today is, who am I? Does anyone have a clue of who that would be? Yes. Abraham Lincoln. So at age 52, Abraham Lincoln was elected our 16th and one of our most beloved presidents. That, when we were being trained, we had a whole day of training, and when we were being trained, I felt like that was one of the most impactful things that I came to realize. You know, suicide, depression, suicide, it affects everyone. It doesn't mean just because someone might be higher up, President of the United States for all, it doesn't mean that everyone, that no one's immune to it, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, I could have issues, the president had issues, like we all could have moments where there could be something that isn't quite right in our life. So did saving this man's life make a difference? I would say yes, it absolutely made a difference. So we want to know, and the question that you need to ask yourself is, who will you save throughout your life? We have potential. Who will you save? So QPR, Brandon talked about this a little bit. So it's pretty simplistic. It's question, persuade, and refer. Ask a question, save a life. I really rested easy when I learned this. QPR is not intended to be a form of counseling or treatment. I don't have to be a counselor. I just have to offer hope. There are counselors out there. There are more people that are in that professional realm that we need to get these individuals to. But we definitely can offer hope through positive action. So we're going to just watch a little video that brings it closer to home. So this is about a Utah family that experienced a family member passing.
We want to turn to something that we've been talking about really throughout the whole week here. This time we want to turn our attention to a very important issue here in Utah facing every community within our state.
You know, mothers and brothers and sisters and friends of people that have gone through this, and we come together and support each other.
Tonight, with your help, we hope to break the silence on suicide.
Talking is the key, and there's hope. We've gathered state leaders.
And it has been kind of a taboo subject. It is heart-wrenching.
Experts and families to open the dialogue.
The belief is that if we start talking about it, it's going to give kids ideas. If, as a parent, if I talk to my son Dave, he's going to go out and kill himself. Where the reality is, they've already thought about it.
Suicide is a difficult topic because so many stigmas surround the issue. But we've heard from so many of you who have lost children, family members, and friends to suicide, asking what more can be done to prevent these deaths. And the first step is to talk about it.
Tonight, we'll show you step by step how to have that important discussion with your child. We'll look at Utah's stunning suicide rate and discuss why it's so high. And most importantly, we'll show you where you can go to get help. We also have a story of hope and recovery. And throughout the program, you'll notice a phone number at the bottom of the screen. We encourage you to call it right now if you're seeking some help.
Too many families affected by suicide are left to grieve in silence. News specialist Jeff Lysick reports from Roosevelt, a community mourning the recent death of a high school student.
Yeah, you know, in their professional lives, Marcy and Travis Tucker are trained to spot people who are in need and get them help. He's a lieutenant with the Duchesne County Sheriff's Office. She works as a victim advocate for the county and is also on the Suicide Prevention Board for the Uinta Basin. That's part of what makes their story so tragic. It's also especially difficult because I've known them for almost a decade now. Their kids go to school with my kids, and as a parent, I can't help but put myself in their shoes.
She was fun-loving, outgoing, giving, supportive of others, loved her family and her friends.
Courtney Mae Jensen appeared to have the life many teens dream about. Beautiful and compassionate, drill team captain and student body secretary.
And proud to be who she was.
Accepted to 5 colleges and offered tryouts for 4 dance teams, but maybe headed to the Marine Corps after graduation instead.
Yeah, wherever she went, she was just like the center, the centerpiece of wherever it was.
She was a ball of energy. She was the energy of our family and of our house. And so
on March 26th, that 18-year-old ball of energy ordered her dress for Union High School's prom, and talked excitedly with her mom about their upcoming trip to Zion National Park to hike to Angel's Landing. She also argued briefly with her mom, who caught her in a lie.
So I took her phone and like, come back after your class and come talk to me. And, you know, she went to lunch. I never saw her again.
The next day, Courtney's body was found in a Uinta County park. Her death ruled as suicide.
Immediately, you know your life will never be the same.
The Tuckers knew Courtney was experiencing anxiety and stress about life after high school. They had her talk with a family friend who owns a therapy business.
I thought we were okay.
A few of Courtney's friends, however, knew otherwise.
But I found out afterwards that she did talk to 3 friends and disclosed serious thoughts of hurting herself, I guess.
Tucker doesn't blame her daughter's friends for keeping quiet. As a teen, she probably would have done the same thing. But she said it's time for that to change.
It's not tattling. It's being a true friend. It's helping someone when they can't help themselves. Courtney could not help herself, or this would not have happened.
The Tuckers were worried that talking about their daughter's death might lead to copycat incidents.
You have a feeling things aren't right.
They are more afraid, though, of what could happen if they choose to remain silent.
What scares me is if it happens to Courtney, it could happen to anybody.
We need to have a more grassroots approach to helping other people in our communities so that other families won't have these tragedies.
Now, the Tuckers told me that they've had age-appropriate conversations with all their kids about topics like sex and drug use. They said they even developed code words the kids could use in case they didn't feel like they could ask for help directly. They said they never dreamed they needed to include suicide in those talks until now.
Such a tough story, Jeff. Our hearts go out to all of them. How's the rest of the community reacting to all this?
Well, Courtney was well known and loved not only here in Roosevelt, but also in the neighboring communities of Altamont and Duchesne. That means her death really sent a ripple effect through this area. I've talked to a lot of parents since Courtney died who've told me that they've begun to talk with their kids about what they need to do or what they should do if they feel like they're going to hurt themselves or hear that a friend might want to hurt themselves. The Tuckers say that's exactly the conversation they want parents to have.
A couple of things that came to mind. We generally have a list of a whole bunch of myths and facts, and one of the facts is that someone that is contemplating suicide generally will talk to someone about it at some point. It doesn't mean it will always happen, but there are people generally that will see the signs and will be able to potentially interfere with that. And also, so I was one of those people that actually was afraid to probably talk to my kids about it because I thought, well, heck, I don't want to put that into their head if it wasn't in their head to begin with. But I've come to realize, and I've actually had conversations with each one of my children, and it actually goes over a lot better than I anticipated it did. And I would just encourage you, if you do have children or grandchildren, that, you know, we don't want it to be a taboo subject anymore. We want to bring it to light. And, you know, the thing that I just mentioned to my kids is, you know, I'm your biggest cheerleader, I'm your biggest fan, and in the end, if you have a problem, which we all do, but when it comes and it hits you, just come to me. That's all I'm asking. Promise that you'll just come to me first. And we also learn through this training that that people that generally can get a promise from someone that's contemplating suicide, they generally will go through with their promise before they do the final act. So it's something to think about, is if everything else fails, get them to promise you something. So QPR, so suicide clues and warning signs. The more clues and signs observed, the greater the risk. So please take all signs seriously. Obviously, maybe not all signs will be serious, but I think it's time that we really think about and dive into it a little bit more when you see or observe a sign. Now there are several of these, and I kind of just brought it down to just one example each. But on suicide clues, there's very direct clues, such as if such and such doesn't happen today or within the week, I'm going to kill myself. There's more indirect. Pretty soon, you're not going to have to worry about me anymore, Mom. Maybe a behavioral clue, putting personal affairs in order, acquiring a gun or stockpiling pills. Now, interesting enough, my mom over the last couple of months has called me several times, and she's trying to give away her things. And of course, my QPR training comes into play, and I dive into it a little bit more, and I inquire. You know, there's times where nothing comes of it. You know, she's just trying to make it easier for me, so when that day actually does come, there's less that I'll have to deal with because I'll be a mess anyways. So it's just good to know that I can have that open line of communication and to say, hey, what's happening? So then there's situational, loss of a major relationship, fear of becoming a burden to others, being fired or expelled from school. One thing I find interesting is when we talk about a major relationship, we also have to be careful what we define as a major relationship and what the person that is going through it is defining as a major relationship. You know, you can have 14, 15, 16-year-old child that is going through a major relationship change that is devastating to them, and we're just so glad that they're out of it. So we have to put ourselves in their shoes. All right, Brandon.
So when we think about suicide, all too often we ask the question, why? Why did so-and-so take their own life? What was going through their life? What led them to do what they did? But what we want to do is we want to kind of flip switches. We want to ask the question, how? How did people take their lives? By asking the question, how, maybe we can kind of better understand as to what we can do to be that preventative person in preventing someone from taking their own life. So here we have Sri Lanka and pesticides. Now, Sri Lanka in the mid to late 1990s was having difficulties with pesticides because their pesticides were lethal. They were very lethal. The people, the citizens there were taking the pesticides, consuming them, and they were taking their own lives through that. And so because Sri Lanka asked the question, how were people taking their lives? They found, it's through pesticides. Well, what do we do about it? So what they did was they made them non-lethal. Because of that, the suicide rates dropped 50% from 1996 to 2005. So we can already see how effective it can be when we ask the question, how? But let's put another country out there, the UK. The UK and domestic gas. Now, before 1960, all domestic gas was lethal. By 1970, they had changed the gas to non-toxic because they had asked the question, how? How are people taking their own lives? They asked the question, how, and due to it, suicide rates dropped by nearly a third. And so you're starting to see the correlation of, okay, what can we do? How can we ask the question, find the information, then make sense of it and do something about it? So why the means matters. Now, to bring it here nationally, within the U.S., suicide rates are often relatively brief. Now, this was something that was kind of awestruck Nicole and myself. We were trained when someone thinks about contemplating on taking their own life, we think about this lengthy period of time where they're saying, you know what, I'm going to do it, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to say that there's not planning involved. But research has shown that when someone actually decides to take their own life, we're talking minutes. We're not talking hours, we're not talking days, weeks, we're talking minutes. And that's because there is such an adrenaline rush. And they are making that decision right then and there, am I going to do it? That was different. I didn't think about that before. Suicide attempts are often undertaken quickly with little planning. Some are going to be planned out. Majority, as research has shown, generally is not. So why focus on firearms? Now, just like the UK asked the question how, domestic gas was the issue, Sri Lanka, pesticides, firearms. Firearms is a topic of conversation within the US, and I just want to be very, very clear that we're not up here saying we're anti-firearms. But what we're up here saying is, You ask the question, how? How are people taking their own lives? And what they have found, that firearms are about 3 times the highest. So let me rephrase this. So people are more likely to take their own lives through firearms than any other weapon, any other means within the U.S. That's just the facts. So with that, what do? We've asked the question, how? What do you do with it? Well, we're not here to say take away the guns, don't give anyone guns. What we're here to say is make a difference. You're a family member, you're a friend. You may know that they have access to these lethal means, just like Nicole mentioned with Abraham Lincoln and the knife. We may know a family member that may have a knife, may have a firearm. And so what we would do, if you were a gatekeeper and you have that loved one, you have a neighbor, restrict the access they may have to whatever means those are. Firearms is what we're talking about. If it wasn't firearms and it was another weapon, it would be the same thing. You would restrict the access. So then once they're okay, they're not in that level to where they're actually thinking about taking their own life, you give it back to them. That's what we would do. That's what any parent would do for a child that may put themselves in their own harm's way. You would restrict access to that.
So let's just go back to Abraham Lincoln for a minute. So when as a young man, Abraham Lincoln was depressed and suicidal, a friend said of him, "Lincoln told me that he felt like committing suicide often." Seeing suicide warning signs, Lincoln's neighbors mobilized to keep him safe, watching over him and removing his knives and pistols. So interesting enough, back then, they didn't have a name for it except for to being a friend. Now we call it the Gatekeepers. But either way, they pulled together the same kind of net that we're trying to offer today as gatekeepers. So that included for him making sure that the president did not have access to means of suicide. It was said that when he again became depressed later in life, he, quote, dared not even carry a pocket knife. Through that, the recognition that I had was that there are people out there that know their limitations, are open to them, and open to discussion. Then there's a lot of other people, probably such as myself, that is more closed. Sometimes I don't know my limitations. I think I can do everything, but there's probably a lot of things out there that I know that I can't do, but I always think, well, I could probably do that. So be aware that everyone is so individualized, and there are some people that are more open and know their limitations, and then there are others that just don't. And so sometimes we have to recognize that for them. But great for President Lincoln to be able to recognize that of himself. So now we're going to talk about the question. There's a less direct approach, and this is just really individualized, what makes you feel comfortable. So you could simply say, have you been unhappy lately? And start a conversation like that. Some people prefer a more direct approach. Are you thinking about ending your life? And you need to do what is comfortable for you. We have several tips here that we can offer. So number one, if in doubt, don't wait, ask the question. So many times we think we're going to offend someone, but I can guarantee you if you ask the question in the right way, in the right setting, with the right frame of mind, that person will walk away knowing that you cared about them. If the person is reluctant, be persistent. Talk to the person alone in a private setting. Allow the person to talk freely. Give yourself plenty of time. Once someone opens up, you don't want to have to shut them off. So make sure that you pick the right time and place. And then we also advise to have your resources handy, such as our QPR card, phone numbers, counselors' names, and any other information that might help. And we do have QPR cards up here, so you're welcome to take some after that you can just put into your wallet. If I could just remind everyone, it is so much less important of how you ask the question. It's more important that you just ask the question. And if we were doing the actual certified training today, you actually would be surprised of how difficult it is to actually ask the question. Anyways, but the more that we bring it to light, the more easier it will become. It's probably never going to be easy, but it's the right thing to do. So I'm going to pick on my very good friend here. So Amber, this would probably potentially be how not to ask the question. But if I said to you, you're not suicidal, are you? Amber, you're not going to hurt yourself, are you? Tell me just briefly how that comes into your soul and what you think I'm expecting from that.
I guess initially I feel like, okay, I already put up a wall. Like, no,
Right.
no, why would you assume that of me? You've already thought that, and so I've already assumed that you thought the worst of me, that I would do that. So I'm probably automatically going to say no, even if I was.
Great. So I think that we would all answer that the same. We need to try to allow people not put in to their head the words that we want them to come back and tell us. That we need to just remember that we're their friend. Everyone has problems and issues, and we all deal with it differently. So if we could advise you to not potentially put it in that form, that would be beneficial. Then the next would be to persuade. So when you do find out that someone is hurting, that someone needs more assistance than what you're able to provide to them, first you want to listen to the problem and give them your full attention like we discussed. And then please remember, suicide is not the problem, only the solution to the perceived insoluble problem. And that's why we're offering them hope. We want to give them hope. Like it could be really detrimental what their problem is, but there is a way out of it, and not by completing suicide. So another great thing is don't rush to judgment. Like I said, if I was rushing to judgment with Amber and said, "You're not trying to do that, are you?" That's me automatically judging her and her not wanting to be open. And then offer hope in any form. And then ask, will you go with me to get help? A lot of times people won't get help on their own. But if I said to Amber, "Amber, will you just come with me? Just come with me to get help." And I'm going to get emotional because, anyways. And then, will you let me help you? I mean, it could be a coworker, it could be a neighbor, it could be a best friend. But the most important thing is that you see the hope and they don't see it for themselves. And you need to get them to a place where you can show them that there is hope and you can bring it to light. Okay, then the next would be refer. I shouldn't have asked Amber for any of that because that's when I get emotional when I talk about my best friends. So, suicidal people often believe they cannot be helped, so you may have to do more. And then we go through, there's good, there's better, and there's best. But try to remember that the very best involves taking that person directly to someone who can help them. Help them set an appointment. Go with them if that's the way that they're the most comfortable. Whether they have to talk to a family member or a counselor or someone in their church, and if they're religious, offer that because you want to connect the dots and not leave them hanging. And this is where it comes in. Also, what I was saying is about the promise. If they absolutely refuse, you need to get a promise from them because that might be their lifeline. And then, so great, please remember this. We are only responsible to do what we know to do at the time it needs doing, not for the things that we will learn to do later. I think that suicide brings so much to people that are left behind, so much pain and suffering and feelings of, I could have done more, I should have done more. And it's a lot of guilt. And we're not here to put any guilt onto anyone. We do the very best we can at the time, knowing that if we learn something in the future, like today, if you learn something today, then walk away and just do something a little bit better. Okay, so in closing, we have one last little segment of a video that we thought would be beneficial. So sometimes it is hard to ask the question. It's hard to approach people. It's hard to approach children, coworkers, friends, whatever it may be. But this is really like from the mouth of babes, and we thought that this was fantastic to understand what children, what teenagers, what these young people need from adults today.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
or getting really mad, not able to sleep, or sleeping too much,
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late,
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed, not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I have no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
that's crazy.
Don't be such a drama
You're
queen.
making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing yourself over. That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help? We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
a lot of people think about killing themselves. Adults and kids. Most of them never tried, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself, take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself. Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts. Make a list together, right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Be sure your home is safe. If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. With bullets, too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask. Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference. All the difference. In your kid's life.
So just to recap on what Nicole mentioned, what I mentioned, it's not easy to ask the question. It's less important of how you ask it, more important that you ask it. Now, I'm kind of in an interesting predicament right now. My wife's grandpa has been diagnosed with some heart failures. He's elderly and isn't doing so well. And so they've got the family together, they've gone to the doctor, they've started informing people, hey, here's his heart condition, here's what's going on, here's what's not good. They're talking about it. They're talking about it openly. They recognize, hey, he's old. You know, it's a matter of time of when it happens, but they're saying, okay, we love you. Here's what we need to look to do. Here's what we want to do. They put the arm around him and they talk openly about it. I would hope that one day we can get there with suicide just the same, that we can openly converse about it, that we won't cringe, that we won't be shy about it, but that we'll talk about it, because the more we talk about it, the more we better understand what's going on, and the more we can show people that, you know what, I love you, and here's why I love you. I work for the county. We've got 500 employees. Because of my line of work of what I do, I'm kind of in the know of what's going on within people's lives, just because I get to know them, talk to them, and it's been unfortunately hard for me to talk to a lot of people when I find that their loved one, whether it was their daughter, their son, their wife, took their own life. Within 500 county employees, the amount of people I'm aware that work for the county government, I can come up with a list of 10 just off the top of my head. And I'm sure there's many, many more that I'm not aware of. And so it's just to put it out there and say it's real, it's happening. Brock Belknap, our county attorney, Corey Pulsifer, our sheriff for the county, I've talked to them, worked with them. Happens weekly, happens daily. People are put in BMED at the hospital because they're suicidal. People are, when they're incarcerated, are put in certain cells so they don't take their own lives, so they can be on a 24-hour, 7-day watch, because it's happening. And a lot of it isn't publicized within the media, within the newspaper. It is what it is. But that's why we're here. That's why we're here talking about it. That's why we're here informing you about it. And hopefully, at the end of this presentation, which is now, it's been informational, it's been powerful, it's allowed you to know how to question, how to persuade, and how to refer when you hopefully recognize that someone is going through a tough time, that they may be looking at taking their own lives. Now, the last message I do want to share that Nicole and I always talk about is, don't feel after you leave here that you reflect, like Nicole brought up, and say, you know what, I should have recognized when this person took their own life. Maybe I was a culprit in that. We can't do that. That's with a lot of other things, but especially with suicide. We can do our very best to recognize what's going on in people's lives, but we may never know. We may never recognize it. And because life is busy, we've got our cell phones, we've got our family obligations, our work obligations, the best we can do is just try to recognize, to try to be more open and work from there. Now, generally, Nicole and I wouldn't ask for any questions because I don't think we have any answers for you, but we do have a little bit of time. One last thing too, before I forget, Nicole and I, we've been tasked by the commission to talk and to present this information to all of our county employees. Now, I'm sure many of you as business owners, as you are, may be interested just the same with additional presentations, whatnot. Just so you're aware, Southwest Behavioral Health Center is the one that is pushing this forward. They're the hub for the suicide presentations. If you want additional presentations, additional information, conversation topics, what have you, contact Pam. You all know Pam, you don't know me. Pam will contact Nicole or myself, and we can get you in contact with Southwest to get you what you need. We're happy to help. We want to make sure as many people are as trained as possible, because their goal is to get, as soon as possible, 1/4 of all Washington County residents trained on QPR. Now, it's a pretty daunting task, given that there's about 150,000, 160,000 people in Washington County, but regardless, that's a goal that we want to set our aim high and say, you know what, why not? Why wouldn't we? So we've got a couple minutes. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, so you have the conversation, you ask the question, are you going to kill yourself? They say yes, let's get you help. No, no, not going to get help. You say maybe call 911 if you have to, and that may be the situation where you call 911, but they told you yes. They're thinking about this, you're scared, it's the situation, you call 911, I guess, and then what does 911 do? What happens from there?
See, that's why we don't ask questions. That's a great question. So it's my understanding, and if there's someone more educated in this audience that would like to respond, absolutely.
Call 911 and an ambulance would come and respond to that patient, that person. And we would evaluate them as paramedics. With whatever agency is wherever they may live, we'll evaluate them, talk to them. Most of the time, they'll go into the hospital. We'll convince them to go into the hospital and be evaluated by the doctor. If they are persistent, we have some different avenues to get them to go. If they are persistent to tell us they do want to hurt themselves, we will not go to the hospital. The officers can, what is called pink sheet them or blue sheet them, which is against their will. Say that they're a harm to themselves and they have to go with us. We would really like them to go on their own, prefer them to go on their own, because anybody that goes on their own has a higher chance of doing better. So, but in those cases that they don't want to go, we can get the authority and the police involved to help us get them to go to the hospital.
And what is your name?
Quinn Campbell, go across the ambulance.
We're going to be inviting Quinn to our presentations moving forward. I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Thank you.
In the presentation earlier, you talked about the longer time you would take to certify people. Is that only on a one-on-one out to the businesses, or are you conducting at the county or at Southwest a set time where this presentation certification would happen?
So Nicole and myself, we are part of the team through Southwest Behavioral Health Center. There's quite a few trainers out there. There's retirees, people like us that are working daily. What they would do is you would reach out to Southwest Behavioral Health Center, and we could do that for you. We would say, hey, this business, this entity wants to know more, wants to be trained. It's about an hour-and-a-half training. They'll come to you. They'll do it on, you don't have to pay for anything. They just need a location. They generally want to keep the group size to about 30. They want to keep it a little intimate, just given the conversation and given questions answered. And so they would come to you, then you would just schedule it with them accordingly. I mean, we're happy to help. We're going to work with you. It's not something you have to bring to Southwest, a group to Southwest. They've got available space, though, if you need it. I'm sure they'd be more than willing to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there an age limit to be certified?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. We can find that out for you. If so, it might be 18, but do you know that they do a lot within school districts?
Okay.
So that's why I don't think so.
Okay, and so and with that question, if you did get a group together, there were, say the adults wanted to get certified, but maybe children or teens could at least be present even if they didn't get certified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I do think that they can be certified. So we'll double check and let Pam know. Yeah.
One more. So what age do you recommend, like as a parent, is there an age that's recommended to start talking to your kids about this? I mean, I know you have to go off their level of understanding, but I mean, like a 3-year-old, is that just something I need to, I guess, research what their level of understanding is, or what, do you know a good age to start talking about this?
So to be honest, I would never feel comfortable answering that because I feel like it's very individualized. I do feel like it's based upon the person that you're going to be chatting with or the child. You know them better than I would standing up here. But I would say that to try to cultivate always a good relationship with your children, it has to start young. Because if I didn't have a good relationship with my older daughters, I couldn't have just taken them out for a drink and ice cream and said, hey, by the way, what do you think about, have you been upset? Like, have you thought of suicide ever? Like, it just would be a more difficult conversation than if I had that friendship along the way so they knew where I was coming from. And you know what? It's never too late. So I'm going to say, if you don't have the kind of relationship you want, it's never too late. You start somewhere and you grow the seed, and then you do it out of love, And so, really quick, just in closing, and I know Pam, I know we're at 1 o'clock, but something that really struck me in one of the trainings that we trained some of our group with, there was an older gentleman. He was almost retirement age, so he raised his hand because we do a lot of back and forth question and answer there as well. And he talked about knowing this individual person in high school. They were friends. This gentleman has since moved clear across the United States into a different state. He was working for us. He said out of the blue, 20, 25 years down the road, he gets a text message from this gentleman, and this text message went to him and it went to his wife. And it basically was his goodbye that he was going to complete suicide. And it was shocking to him. After all these years, he had no idea. I mean, first of all, he was panicked. He was panicked. He didn't know how to get a hold of the person. He tried to call that gentleman back. And so through the rigmarole, he finally realized that it was okay, and they got the help that they needed. But what struck me so well is that, do you know that we do not know how we impact people's lives? He had no idea what he had done to that gentleman, but for whatever reason, that gentleman felt the most comfortable reaching out to him next to his wife to say, I'm in trouble and I need help. So I just want you to remember that, is that we impact people's life daily and we might not ever know. So to just become better friends and acquaintances, we could save people's lives without even understanding what we've done. So that's kind of just what I want to leave with you today. So thank you very much, Pam, for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda and Nicole. This was really eye-opening, and it's something that we need. And absolutely, you know, I can personally say suicide has touched my life in many times, in many ways, and so I encourage you to get certified, to just reach out to people and make sure, just to let all of you know, I love each and every one of you. Come to me anytime, seriously. So, I would like to thank Community Education Channel. They just filmed all this. Send it to your friends, send it to your people that you work with, your family. Let them see it. It may open up a conversation that needs to be done. Go to youtube.com/community education channel.